Hi, welcome to the January 26th, 2021 Club Cubase Google Hangout. I'm going to do a quick audio test and make sure everything is coming through as expected. Hi, welcome to the... Okay, that sounds fine. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. If you have not attended a Hangout before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, or you could ask them live in the chat field. This Hangout will be available to watch afterwards. If you're watching this not live, you may want to just kind of skip ahead maybe 5 or 6 minutes while we get people logged in and then some quick introductions. So once again, you could ask questions in the comments field. It'll be helpful sometimes if you could actually specify, which computer platform you're running, which version of Cubase. You can say I'm running, Cubase 11 Pro on Mac OS, or I'm running Cubase Elements 9.5 on Windows 10. That information would be helpful. As we are going through questions, the ability to ask questions will far exceed my ability to answer all the questions. We'll try to get through as many questions as completely and as succinctly as possible. So if you ask the question over and over again, when I'll probably be getting to it, that just kind of slows down the whole process. So if we could try to not do that, that would be really helpful. So, and we will try to have a live time-stamped index for the Hangout later tonight with all the topics that are covered. Last Hangout we talked about after we did kind of like a little Christmas like Zoom after the Hangout right before Christmas, and some people wanted to do that. So I was thinking of doing it the last Hangout of the month where we could do that. So Friday's Hangout, we may go for 3 hours and have an hour of Zoom Hangout afterwards where we could actually meet each other and talk, and someone else could, talk beside me. You're probably tired of hearing my voice, but I really enjoyed meeting people that were in the last one. So if you want to send an email to clubcubase at steinberg.de, I could send you a Zoom link. I know we've had some people that had already received those. So let's go ahead, so feel free to send an email and I'll send you kind of the Zoom invite. So it'd be great to meet as many people as possible. But let's go ahead and see who is on Hangout. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. So let's see. All right, so we have Sir Robert from Atlanta, longtime, very loyal Steinberg user. Okay, so we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. We have Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida. All right, John Costigan from Kenosha. We have Uno from Finland. All right, so we have Vancouver, Washington, Senegal, Lancashire. Okay, so we have Jan, who's always generous enough. He created a website where you could search for all of our Club Cubase hangouts. If you go to cubaseindex.com. But Jan's checking in from Stockholm. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Okay, so Preston from Lancashire. All right. All right, so we have Ted from Sherman Oaks. Good to see Ted. Okay, so we have Norfolk in the UK. Soren from Sweden. All right, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. We'll let some more people get logged in. All right, so we have Denver, Colorado. All right. So just seeing kind of Club Cubase questions coming in as we do it, so I probably won't be able to read through that. All right, so we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We have Israel. All right, we'll give it our minute or two, then we'll go ahead and get started. So if you guys want to start asking questions in the comments field. All right, good to see Mandy Lane on a Hangout again. All right, and Gareth is on. All right, we have Scott from Racine, Wisconsin. All right, so I guess he was on the NAMM presentation we did last week. We have Norway, Milwaukee. All right, so we have 3 people from Wisconsin. All right, so we have Oklahoma City, New York. So I guess from in the snow in New York, we got a little bit of snow, just enough for my son to kind of fill up a bucket and make a snow sculpture. All right, so we have Netherlands, Italy. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So question, hi, I'm thinking of buying Shreddage 3 guitar plugin for Cubase 10, which requires a contact player. Do you think it'll be okay there without any conflict? So we have lots of people that use, contact-based instruments directly inside of Cubase. So it's a very popular playback engine, so you won't have any problems with your Cubase in terms of compatibility or conflicts. So you should be all set with that. Enjoy your new library. All right, so question, is it possible to see your VST inserts from your mixer window? Also, is there a way to change your VST insert other than the inspector on the left? Thanks. All right, so let me just jump to a project that has some more tracks in it. Okay, so when we look at our particular tracks here, so let's say I could see my inserts I could see my mixer at the bottom of our project here. So as we kind of go along, and we could have these 2 little icons here. So this will allow you to see your inserts for each track and your sends for each track. So your inserts could be accessed kind of 2 different areas on the main project window. So if you wanted to see your inserts here, we could drag and drop inserts directly on plugins from the inspector. But if you don't want to do it from the inspector, just click on this icon here, and now you could see all of your available inserts, and you could add different inserts and be able to just come right over here, double click on the insert to add, to open up the user interface. And you could also just drag and drop plugins. So if you wanted to, drop it to another spot, or if you wanted to copy it, you could just hold down the, Alt or Option key, and then you can copy it with all of its settings. In the main mix console window, what you could do is come over here and in the racks, make sure that I believe by default you'll have your inserts selected, and then you could click on the inserts tab and you could see all of your inserts and sends, everything kind of directly there. So if you want to see channel strip, so all of those different functions can be available as inserts in kind of the main mix console, the inspector, or just by, again, clicking here. So you can see your faders, inserts, and sends kind of all directly right there in the lower zone mixer as well. Okay. Just thanks for all the great questions. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you subscribe and give a thumbs up if you like kind of what you're seeing on the Hangout. All right. Okay, so we see 4 singers record on 4 tracks. Each sings a new take with the other 3 parts. How can control room be used to adjust the volume of the other recorded singers using a remote mixer, i.e. Furman HR6? So I'm assuming that maybe the Furman HR6 is just like a headphone. So I'm not sure. I'll take a quick look on my system just to make sure I don't go down the wrong path here. Bear with me while I look up. Okay, so it's a headphone amp. Okay. Okay, so we have 4 singers record on 4 tracks. Each sings a new take with the other 3 parts. Okay, how can control room be used to adjust the volume of the other recorded singers? So if you have this set up in the control room, let me just create, see if I have a project that imagine we are going to be doing some vocal parts. I think I may have some harmonies and this project here, my friend Clay Oswald lets me use. Okay, so we'll go to, let's say, I think we have a vocal group here. So let's say we have our background vocals. All right, so let's say as we're listening to it, we want it to, and I'll get my keyboard working on the correct computer. Okay, so how it's going to work is if we wanted to do our different headphone mixes, I could set this up where, you know, as we want to have our control room, we get this configured just by, let me just hide my input channels. So I will come directly over here and I will select just my studio. Let's go to our audio connections. And now we could come over here and click on a control room. You want to make sure, that the control room is turned on. And that as we kind of work with this, we could right click and add, different parts here. So I have 4 different Q mixes. So you could right click and add a Q mix. So you could add up to 4 different Q mixes. So when we have this done, our Q mixes will show up in our control room kind of at the top here. So ideally what you'd want to do if you wanted to be able to adjust the different levels of the different sources for the Q mixes, we'll do this in kind of the full screen mixer. And we'll go to racks and make sure that our Q sends is activated. So I will just go ahead and close some of the other components here. So say we're going to have our Q sends. And what I want to do is to be able to go to I want to select all the channels in my project. So I will just come here. And I will right click in the control room and we'll go to all Qs. And first thing I want to do is to activate all of the Q sends. So I will enable that. And I want to use the current mix levels. So I will come here and let's click on use current mix levels. And what this is going to do is replicate kind of the faders and how they're set. And that will be replicated in the control room. So as we want to, let's just say we'll select our vocal part here. All right, so we have these soloed now. So what we want to do is we could say, okay, in our vocal headphone mix, we could set different levels because you may want to have one particular level. So I'll just, the singer may want to hear, like, I know one of the singers I used to work with a lot, she wanted to hear the bass, and that was kind of her foundation for her intonation. And she would listen for that and kind of cue off that mentally. So in that case, what we could do is, if we are feeding the audio output to your Furman, and that's, I believe, just kind of a 4-in or like a 4-out headphone amp. I don't think it's going to actually have multiple inputs. So we could take kind of our one signal, and I'll just look at it just to make sure on the input connections. All right, so it looks like it just has I just want to look at some pictures of it. Okay, so what you would want to do is to take the outputs from the audio interface and the connections, and we want to connect each of the different headphones to discrete outputs here. And this could be analog outputs. Generally, it could be a headphone output from your audio interface. But we need to define like our guitar, the bass, the vocals, and drums here out of separate audio outputs. Now, once those out, and each of these outputs will then feed a particular, headphone monitoring system, kind of like your HR6. So the Furman unit. So as we want to do that, I could now come over here to the vocalist, and I could adjust what the mix is that's in my control room here. And a vocalist may go, I want to hear more of myself in my headphone mix. So what we could do is we want to send more of the vocals into their headphone mix. So I'm going to take these vocal tracks and feed them into the headphone mix. Now, when we listen to it in a control room, we may not notice a difference until we actually go to listen to our different Q mix. So let's say if I go to Q Mix 2, so as we want to just kind of listen a little bit, we could bring out other instruments. So let's say if I want to go to like Q Mix 1, and let's say in Q Mix 1 for the bassist, they want to hear more of themselves. I could come here and I'm going to feed the bass player. Now if I wanted to listen to like just the mix, we can see that that mix is going to be different than what the bass player is hearing. And let's say the bass player wants to hear more kick drum. So I can say we're going to send more kick to the bass drum, to the bass player's headphone mix. But it's not actually affecting the mix of the project itself. So we come here, let's say to the mix. Now what the bass player is hearing, it's going to have him up louder and the kick louder. So this way we could send more of this particular channel, let's say the overheads, the snare, to the bass player, to the vocals, to the drums, to the different Q mixes, just laid out for you right here by adjusting these sliders. And that way the vocalist can have a more me headphone mix. The bass player could have a more me headphone mix. The drummer can. And this way they could kind of get the best performance. So again, Go to your audio connections. You want to make sure that these are going out into your system, into audio outputs from your interface that could be fed into a headphone distribution system. And it looks like I saw maybe like kind of like an Ethernet connection. So it may go into like a master unit and then be distributed where someone could adjust the, 4 different Q mixes directly there on the Furman unit. But that's kind of how you get it, from here, from the audio outputs that are defined in the audio connections and control room under the Qs. And again, you would just right click and choose to add a Q mix, and you could have 4 Q mixes. And then each source you could feed to different amounts of the Q mix. So once you kind of get that set up, that's how you could do kind of your headphone mixes, and then they're actually stored within the project themselves. So if that, let me know if that helps, Paul. All right. So we have a question. Hi, how can I print the click to a track and then send along to another musician for them to record to? Okay, so I think this came in 9.5, but if we wanted to, I'm going to just set up my left and right locators around the song. And what we could do now is go to the project menu and you'll see signature track. And what you want to do is just to render audio click between locators. And as soon as that's done, your click track is now just generated as an audio file. So you could just kind of come right over here. Let's get to the mix. And that's just our audio file right there. All right. So once again, just set the left and right locators for the range that you want to do. Go to your project menu, to signature track, and render audio click between left and right locators. And then you could have a separate audio file and you could feed that directly, export that with someone else and have them play, to the click track or, with other tracks as well. So. All right, so we have a question. Using chord pads in pattern mode, how do you record the resulting output? When I try notes are recorded sustained and it misses the first chord pad, I press on bar 1. All right, so let's take a look at it. Try to recreate this. So let's say if I will just do quick pattern. All right, you see how this sounds here. Okay, so I'm going to just drag this particular pattern out. Okay, and then I'm going to drag this onto one of the chord pads. So if you're not familiar with kind of the chord pads, you can come over here and, be able to audition some of these. So let's say, so now I could trigger these. But we could also assign different pattern modes. So let's say if I want to go to pattern, so I'm going to just take this little clavinet part here. And then I'm going to drop the MIDI part directly into there. So say, okay, so I'll go back to my different chord patterns. Okay, so it says, so when using chord patterns in pattern mode, how do you record the resulting output? When I try notes are recorded are over sustained and it misses the first chord pad when I press on bar 1. Okay, so I'm going to, let's say I'll get rid of this particular part. And I'll just turn my click track on. Okay, so I'll just come. All right, so let me just get the range here that I'm playing. Sorry. Okay, so one of the things to check is that you actually could choose to actually have the chord pads as the MIDI input. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. So let's say I just will record. And it could depend upon the pattern that's in there. So this particular pattern, let me just adjust the pattern here so it actually starts on the first note. So as I want it to, let's say I'll just, okay, so now we'll start this pattern on the first note. So I'll go back to my chord pads and let's go to the setup. So, you know, depending on the pattern, like that pattern didn't start on. So now. Okay, so now as soon as I kind of come over here, we'll set the chord pads there as a pattern. So and I'll do the 2 measures count in. Sorry about that. Move this all the way over. So, you know, just depending upon the pattern, so that pattern doesn't start right at the beat, but it's kind of seems to be working. But make sure, try setting this up where the chord pads are the MIDI input and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, good to see Gareth on a Hangout. All right, so we have Lewis from Chicago. Good to see you. Okay, so you see Gareth just, you know, he sent me some projects to play bass on. So I did get to listen to those particular files. I'll send you an email about what other files you need the bass parts on. So, okay, so we have a question. Hi, is there any way to, I'll just do it with this project. Is there any way to take an audio track and transpose it up or down without affecting the timing? Cubase 11 Mac, thanks. So there's a number of ways of doing this. So let's say as we're playing, if I wanted to take my bass and guitar parts in this, we have this transpose icon. And you could just transpose directly there. You could also use kind of a transpose track. So if you wanted to kind of automate that process, you could come here. Let's add a transpose track. So And we could tell certain tracks not to follow global transpose. So we could just those in the info line. But if you wanted to just kind of come here, you could just say, I want to transpose here, and the pitch won't change. So now it will go back to the original key here. And then when it gets to this part, it'll go down one semitone. So you could do stuff like that as well. So if you want to do it live just like that, that's kind of an easy way to do it. Question, Greg, which Cubase instrument plugins can be used in other DAWs? So I think that if you just have the instrument plugins by themselves, like if you have, just the Cubase instruments will be fixed to Cubase. But, if you had something, like we have people that will go out and buy the Absolute 4 VST collection. And if you have that, those could be used in any other program. So those will work as VST, AU, and I believe AAX as well. So all the plugins that you purchase, but the ones that come with Cubase will kind of be fixed to Cubase. Okay. All right. So we have Peter checking in from Portland, Maine. Got to go up there once. It was beautiful. All right, so just saying Cubase Index website looks like a brilliant idea. Well done, whoever that is. So that's Jan. He's on the Hangout today. So kudos to Jan for that. All right, my chat field just kind of jumped on me, so bear with me. One other thing I'll apologize in advance is, like many people, I have my families at home, so I may get interrupted by my son when his school. He'll be very happy to when his school is done for the day. All right, so let me just find my spot. Okay. All right, so we have Nova Scotia also checking in. Claudius, welcome to the Hangout. Neurotic Nexus, good to see you. I just see Cubase is the best, and so is Greg, the best teacher. I just kind of show what the smart people in Hamburg have created for us all. So, all right, so Gareth is now officially part of the Cubase 11 Elite, so that's great. All right, so we have someone from Greece checking in. Okay. So question, is there any way to commit the resulting chord track, follow tracks, so that the MIDI data can lock in place and no longer be affected by chord track changes? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's just jump back. Okay, so let's say if I have... I'll just kind of get a part here. So let's say, so I'll take this project here where we were, our clavinet part. Okay, so let's say if I put this into a chord track. All right, so I'll just put in some quick chord changes here. So let's say. Okay, so let's say I've now entered some chords in. And what I want to do is to have this particular track follow the chords. So we're going to say, we'll go to our chords and let's go to our chord track. So we'll say automatically follow the chord. So we're going to choose to follow directly. So let's say now we'll listen to it. All right, so I'll just mute the chord track. Sorry. So we'll come here. So let's say. And I'll just go ahead and put some more chords. It's a little more obvious harmonically. Okay, so, once we have so I'm going to choose to, again, follow the chords. So once that is done, all you have to do is just choose for it to not follow any subsequent chord changes. Then whatever chord changes that we have, so I'll just make the chord track a little larger here. So as we want to take the chords, I'll just choose to transpose based on the chords. So I'll just take this and let's transpose, and everything the MIDI parts itself won't follow, because this particular track is chosen not to follow the chords. But if I say follow the chords now, it can now follow those particular chords. So just choose for it, once you've done that, you could just select for it not to follow the chords. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, in the mixing window, how can I delete an effects or group track that has already been created? Cubase 11 Mac. So let's say if I wanted to, let's go ahead and add a couple group tracks. All right, so say we'll have 4 groups, and let's add 2 effects channels. Okay, so these will often show up in folders, usually by default, under like group tracks or effects tracks. So you may just see them here. So if we want to look at it, let's say in our mix console view, I will just go ahead and hide. So we see these are our effects channel tracks, and these are the group tracks. So if I select these 2 tracks, and then right click, we could remove selected tracks, and then they're removed. And let's go to our group tracks. So if I wanted to just choose these 4 tracks right here, and again, just remove, select, right click, remove, or control click on Mac and remove your selected tracks, and then they'll be deleted. All right, so it looks like I may have another bass line to play, so looking for that. Okay, so Neurotic Nexus is watching the Hangout while he's working out. That's good. Yeah, I was up early, like 6 o'clock in the morning, so I get my workout in. All right, just seeing if, going back, see if I missed kind of a quick comment. Do I see a reference to maybe? Okay. All right, so going through the different comments here. So I just see from Daniel Pashman, maybe I'm not seeing the earlier reference. It just says, sorry, I meant VST Instruments, haha. So I was just kind of circling back to see if I missed that. But if I think I may have missed it, so just let me know. Question, when can we see audio drag to chord track and analyze the chords from audio like in Studio One? So currently it's not really set up for that. So I know that the product planning is well aware of the desire for, for that functionality. So, but I'll pass it on again. Okay, so I have a question. How to edit continuous controller across all tracks at the same time? All right, so let's go ahead and let me just add a number of instrument tracks. So what a lot of people will do, I'll just duplicate this one more time. Is, you can now just kind of paste. So let's say if I have a quick part here. Okay, so I wanted to draw in just okay, so let's say I just wanted to draw in modulation. So let's say I have modulation data in this particular part, and I now want to have modulation there. And I have modulation there. So what some people will do is, what a lot of people miss is the ability to just write controller information. So let's say as we record, so I'm going to just move my mod wheel here, and we could choose to, and there's different MIDI record modes. So if you want it to go to your MIDI record mode, and you could choose to, replace existing parts. So let's just say, or if you wanted to overwrite. So one way of doing it is just to come here, and as you move the mod wheel, just to record that modulation data into all 3 parts. So let me just set this up so it's going to the right input on all of these instead of the chord pads. So now if I just move my modulation, if I get this set up correctly, sorry. So when I come here, I'll just punch in, and now I'm going to record the same modulation data into all the parts. But if you wanted to copy, so there isn't a way to link the automation data, but it used to be prior to version 11 that it was like really kind of odd, because it would superimpose like the MIDI CC data on top. So if we select like your MIDI CC parts, so let's say I just wanted to select this, so we can now come over here and, we could do kind of our typical right click, and I wanted to copy. And so if I do my changes here, I can now double click, and I could choose to right click and we'll just say paste at origin. And that would take that modulation data that we've edited here. So now when we want to, again, right click just in the controller lane to paste at origin. So that way the same modulation data you can copy and paste. So in previous versions, it would kind of paste, but if there was data kind of in between, it would still keep the existing data. So it was really kind of a bit messy. So I kind of, brought that to the attention of some of the product planning people, and they were able to kind of resolve that so you could copy and paste more accurately. But there isn't a way to kind of automatically do it. But what a lot of people I see do when they do it is just record the MIDI CC data for all three parts at once, and they find that works well. All right, good to see Ambient Dave on a Hangout just for a quick pop by. So hope you had a good birthday on Friday. All right, so we have a question from Louis Che. Can I create vocal harmonies without a chord track? So yes, you could do it, but it kind of guesses like the thirds and fifth, but it may not be working within the particular song. So, if you have the chord track, you could, have the harmonies that are created be automatically musically correct based upon a chord track. So once so if you do it without the chord track, it can kind of guess and it'll give you kind of like thirds and fifths, but those thirds and fifths may not be the correct notes. So you're probably better doing it with the chord track, but you could just kind of randomly generate harmony voices without it. So I would just make sure they didn't change that in any way. So we'll take a quick look. So let's say I wanted to do harmonies here. So I'll just get an audio to generate harmony voices. Let's do 3 harmony voices, and we'll see if this randomly works. So, so with the chord track, it's going to automatically kind of just split it out correctly. So, so it's always best to do it with a particular chord track if you can. All right, good to see Pablo on a Hangout from Galicia, España. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so just seeing for Colin Lewis, it says I have a song with CC91 reverb and CC93 chorus. Can you edit those across all tracks at the same time? So you can't necessarily do that, but again, the CCs, so you could do kind of what we just showed a little bit earlier. So. Or if you have just a MIDI file, if it's going to be 91, 93, another quick way of doing it. I'll try just something else quickly here. But if you go to, if you wanted to go to your tracks, if it's, CC 91, 93, let's say you're on a MIDI track, you could go, just kind of leave this open. And if you go to the MIDI control, and then I think it's here where you could, maybe it's under track control, then you could go through like your GS XG1 and you could kind of tweak that easily. But if you wanted to embed it in the MIDI file, you could just kind of copy that across. But you may not want the same reverb for your MIDI file for CC 91, 93 on every identical for every single track. So, but I guess you might have a situation. So. Okay, so I just see Ted Springman says, discovered a cool trick, drum sample tip trick while spring cleaning last weekend when I was clapping couch pillows together, especially the heavy ones, worth passing along. Yeah, so I remember my dear friend Daryl Pearson, who's, done a lot of, amazing records. I mean, he's Michael Jackson, Madonna, Justin Timberlake, does a lot of work with Timbaland. I remember him telling me a story that, he's doing a session with Dr. Dre, and Dr. Dre was just like, they were playing basketball and, in the gym. And, Daryl's like, how'd you get that kick sound? How'd you get that kick sound? He's like, just listen, you just do different things. And he was just throwing the basketball against the gymnasium wall, and that's what he ended up sampling for his kick drum sound. So you can come up with interesting sounds all over the place, if you just kind of listen well. And one of my friends, Robert Dudzik, he has the Noir sound collection set, and he's like an amazing sound designer. So and check out some of his videos; they're incredibly entertaining, and how he comes up with sounds. But he's a guy that's recording every single door that he runs into, just to capture it. So see, question, is it possible to do the opposite of detect silence? Keep the silence parts? So I don't, let me think about that. Let me see if I have, so say if I wanted to take this vocal and try to see if we could select, right, so like if you wanted to keep kind of like an ambience from that, so let's say if we're listening to our vocal and you wanted that space in between, so let me just take a look. I don't know anything off the top of my head. I mean, we have the detect silence function, so if you have an audio file selected, you could just come right over here, and so say if we do a detect silence, what this will allow you to do is to, set a particular threshold where that won't. So let's say, let's see if there's a way. So say, all right, so let's see if I choose not to select silence. Let's see what happens. So I don't know of a way to to kind of do the opposite of, being able to just keep, the particular silent areas. But you probably could do, there's probably some other aspects that you could treat. So maybe if you did like a hit points, so let's say if I come here and I will just So let's see if we go to hit points. I'll just revert this quickly or jump to this project. I may have some parts that may work. So I know that we can kind of chop it up. So if I come here to the sample editor and let's go to hit points, that we could, create slices. And then, but I don't know a way to automatically select, different parts that have amplitude above 0 to select, unfortunately. Okay, so how to delete part of a track name using the logical editor, delete a word and everything after. Okay, so let's say I will do just a new audio recording here. So let's say we have audio test, and I'll just say Jan 26th. So let's say if I have that in the name, so we want to delete part of a track name using the logical editor, delete a word and everything after. So let's say I wanted to delete everything that says test and everything after. So let's see if we could do that in the project logical editor. So let's choose name. Let's say contains test. So let's say I could delete the words, and let me just see if I could okay, I'll relabel this. So I don't know how to delete everything after a particular word. Let's see. So we could replace, append. So we could do this, but I don't know a way to do that particular word and every word that's after it. But if I wanted to just, take any word that had the word test and, let's say generate name, we could do stuff like that. So let's say from test to club, I think we might be able to. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to do, in this case, I'll just choose audio here. So I don't know an exact way of doing that. But here I could say, okay, if the name contains or equals to audio, let's say if we do this. Contains. So I don't know a way to say delete everything after particular words. But I could play around with it more if you want to. Email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. Sorry about that. All right, so if Sensium saying hi to everyone. So I think vocal transposing up or down needs a seesaw type EQ for like tone lux tilt to compensate for frequency thinness or heaviness. Does Cubase have a similar EQ function? So I think usually the vocal transposing algorithm is not going to be necessarily affected by the EQ. So I think those are kind of different realms. So, but there isn't necessarily like, a EQ that follows, like chord tracks or follows, transpositions that I think there was one I saw one of my friends in Nashville was using that could follow kind of like chords that were typed into it. But I don't think that it would make a difference for, the quality of the transposition. So, all right. So I see from just fun time, I can't activate e-license. So I'm not sure if it's a soft e-license or a hardware e-license. So once you'll probably get a DAC code. And the DAC code, you could enter in your My Steinberg account. And then from your My Steinberg account, once it's registered, you're going to be able to get a e-licenser code. And then that would just be entered in and created directly in the e-licenser program. So once you kind of have that, you could now just kind of enter in the activation code directly there. So you'll just see enter activation code and you should be able to enter that in. But if you're still having issues, if you give us some more information, that would be helpful. All right, so I just have a question. If you could show us an ambisonic project from scratch to export. So I don't really have anything prepared for that, but I could try to have something prepared for Friday's Hangout. So if that's fine, I'll work on getting it done for Friday's Hangout. Sorry about that. I will try to get something prepared so I can make more sense with it. All right. So you see Michael Teams wants people to hit the like button. So, all right. So we have CJ checking in from Las Vegas. Okay. So we see, can you explain more about glide in Cubase? So a lot of times when we're doing, different glide functions, we could do this a couple of different ways using like the sampler track. So let me just find, I think I still may have a project here. All right, let me just find this quickly and I'll show you a couple of things that you could do. Let me look, see if I have this one particular project. See if this is the project I was thinking of. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just come over here and I had... Okay, so let's say I wanted to do kind of like typical 808 kind of glide. So I just have a particular sample loaded in here. So if I wanted to place it into monophonic mode, I could click directly here, and this will allow me to, and we could set kind of the amount of glide. So I'll just turn this up just a little bit so we could all hear it a little better. So if I keep the first note held down, we could set kind of the amount of glide, how long that's going to take. So let's say if I just come here. But there's also this little kind of musical mode. So a lot of times as I do my glides, they're actually going to, you know, start from the beginning of the sample when I hit the second note. So keep one finger held down in the sample track. But that starts it from the very beginning. When I hit the second note, it starts from the beginning of the sample. But if I wanted to switch the pitch in the middle of the sample, I'd click here on this particular icon. And I could do. And let me just adjust my keyboard down an octave. Other way. So you could do different effects like that. So those are some of the things you could try. So make sure you put it into monophonic mode. And if you wanted to change the pitch in the middle, which is often used on a lot of glides, you could just kind of enable it right there in legato mode. So. All right, so someone's checking in from the Basque country. Good to have you on a hangout. So we have a question. Is it possible to have several MIDI tracks with different presets connected to one track rack instrument in the VST tab? So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. So when I come over here, I'll start with an instrument track. So let's say I have Hallian Sonic SE, and I'll start off with, let's say just, all right, so I have like, all right, now what I could do is add MIDI tracks. So I start with an instrument track, but then I could add MIDI tracks. So now this will all be routed to, so I'll just come here and I'll say MIDI track 2. So this will keep the same MIDI output port for the newly created tracks, but it'll increment the MIDI channel. So now I'm going to have, And let's say, okay, I want it to have a synth comp sound on channel 3. So now when I go to the next MIDI track down, and when we do this, you notice that everything's going to be kind of mixed out of, depending, which channel we're on. I'll just load up a couple of additional sounds here. So let's say, okay, so channel 4, and let's do something from Chris St. Aubin's instrument, simple. All right, so when we do this, we can say, okay, MIDI 4, and now I go up, and we can see that this is going to be synchronized. When I select the channel, we'll see it selected here. I hit the arrow key up. I hit the arrow key up again. And now if I wanted these all to go to separate outputs in my mixer, as opposed to all going out of the... So where you see that these are, I see my MIDI tracks. But all you'd have to do now is go to the mix part directly here, and we could route these to different discrete outputs for each of the different sounds. So now as we play, I could just... So we see the slots, and that's how we could kind of do all of our... So this way, like if you had Halion Sonic SE that comes with Cubase, you could have up to, 16 different tracks that are being routed out to it. If you have something like, the full Halion, that could give you 64 channels that go directly from the outputs here, but all within a single instrument. So you have several MIDI tracks, different presets going to one particular instrument, just that easily. Okay, so I just see Nightmare here trying to install Groove Agent content. Very frustrating. So the easy thing to do is wherever the Groove Agent content is go to your Steinberg library manager. And this is a little utility program. You could go to Groove Agent, and you could see it here, but you could also just wherever that vst.sound file is, right click or just double click. That will launch the Steinberg library manager, and that will make the link between the instrument and where it's looking for that content. That will create that link for you. So just try selecting the VST sound file. Most of them you don't have to install. It's just going to be copying over the VST sound files. Do that, right click on it, and choose open in Steinberg library manager, or double click, and that should launch you into Steinberg library manager. And then all of those libraries should be available to see within Groove Agent. Okay. All right, so we have someone checking in from Athens. Welcome to the Hangout. All right, good to see Millard Brown on a Hangout. It's always interesting that people apologize for being late, like they're in school. So I'm not going to hand out a tardy to anyone. So I think it's interesting. But good to see you on the Hangout, Millard. All right, so my chat field jumped on me, so... All right, let me just... Try to find my spot. Okay, so I don't think I lost any questions. Okay. Okay, so I just see from Peter Brown, can transpose feature also invert voicings as well? So let's say if I have just a quick... So let's say I have just a quick part here. So I'll do just... Okay, so let's say if I want to do this, and let's go ahead and select the MIDI transpose setup. All right, so you could, set up different parameters if you wanted to keep notes in particular ranges. So if you say, okay, the lowest note I want is set to, let's say C3, and the highest pitch I want is going to be, let's say G4. Okay, so now I could, and let me undo that. All right, so let's say at this point you go to the transpose setup. So you can say the highest pitch I want is E4. Let's make it F4. So I could say, let's go ahead and transpose up 1 octave, but keep it within those specified ranges to actually, so that the voicings can be a little more consistent maybe with what you want. So check out, if you go to the MIDI to the transpose setup, that, you have different options, and you could also do different scale corrections. So you can say, I want it to be to a C harmonic minor scale. That's the current scale. And I, let's say I'm in C major and I want this to be a C harmonic, or let's say D harmonic minor scale, and hit OK. And you could do scale correction that way. But check out again, in transpose setup, if you keep notes within a specified range. And let me just see if I could double click. Sometimes you can hit the MIDI note to populate the field, but check that out within the transpose setup, and I think you can probably get what you want. Okay, so we see Darko's just coming in to say hello. I guess he's waiting for his therapy, so he can't stay today, so he'll rewatch tomorrow. So good luck with your therapy, Darko. And we hope to see you on Friday's Hangout. All right, good to see Walter Blackledge from St. Louis Club Cubase. I was participating in a St. Louis, Missouri Club Cubase meeting last night. Great group of guys, so it was a lot of fun. Good to see you on there, Walter. Okay, so see from Neurotic Nexus, great question. Issue I had once, the issue that chords in a chord track didn't have the same note length, i.e. one chord just played 2 bars while the others played until chord change. Couldn't find out why. All right, so let's take a quick look. All right, I'll add one more MIDI track, and let's just... All right. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I have... Okay. Okay, so let's say I'll just go ahead and paint in some chord changes here. So let's say, let's go ahead and add a chord track. All right, I'll just go ahead and cheat here. So let's say, okay, so let's see if I go ahead and okay. So I think if you're using it in an example like that, that it could be based upon how the decay of the actual voice until it's, you know, it sees the next chord track. So it could be depending upon the voice sound that's being used. So let's say if I wanted to switch that particular sound to maybe like a string patch. So let's try like just switching that to a pad sound. So now as we would play back the chord progression here, we won't have that decay. We'll see how long it goes. So it could really kind of depend upon, I think, the voicing that's being used to monitor the chords. So give that a see if that makes a difference in your scenario. If not, just let me know. I just see a comment from Michael Fillingim, sorry. It says music class in elementary school was the best. It doesn't translate so well for my son for virtual learning, but he likes music, but he doesn't like his music class, unfortunately. Okay. All right, good to see Sable Winters on the Hangout. So I hope you got the invitation, the link from last night. Okay, for the post hangout on Zoom Hangout. So, all right. So from Ambient Dave, hello Greg. I am just starting on some new projects. So how many projects can I have open so I can work on them all at the same time? You can have as many projects open. So, you know, you can have one project active, but you can have, like, I have all of these projects open currently. And you could just simply choose to activate other projects. So you can have one active project at a time. So if you click here, I could take this project from being inactive and activate this one, and that's what's going to play back. So you can have, you know, no limit to how many projects can be open. Okay, so I just see a comment from John Moore. Hello, I used Cubase back in the late 90s, switched to Reason, just now got back into Cubase 11 Pro, loving the workflow Cubase these days. We're happy to have you back, John. So we're glad you're liking your Cubase 11s, and thanks for coming to the Hangout. And we hope to see you on more Hangouts in the future. Right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you could do that as well. And you could just further comment from John is, thanks, I got to learn this all over again, but coming from background of various DAWs, it's really intuitive. That's great to hear. And you see a comment from Gareth that he likes the modular install options on Cubase 11. So any news about Mac M1 native ports? So, they're going to be working on it. I think we may see some stuff, there may be some minor developments coming soon. So just kind of keep your eyes posted. All right, I see hi from Zephyrilis. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. I've tried to set up a Win 10 computer with VST Performer, I guess VST Connect Performer. Can you clarify the setup for the Performer, as I can't hear anything on the interface? So when you have the VST Connect Performer, I think I have it on this machine. So you may not hear, so you may not hear anything coming until it's connected with whoever you're doing a collaboration with. So you're not going to hear the signal unless you're connected with that particular person. So as soon as you kind of open this up, you may not hear anything, because it's going to be kind of controlled, and the signal is going to be sent and controlled from the VST Connect host. So that may be kind of expected. So you could try, as soon as you're doing the recording, then you're able to hear. So. See people missing salsa in Texas and jam sessions. So I think there will be a lot of great concerts coming up when the pandemic is kind of settled, hopefully. All right, so I just see a question from Millard that I could probably answer, is directed to Gareth. What are the modular install options? So with Cubase 11, in previous versions, it's kind of a difficult balance. Sometimes you want to make sure that, no one can mess up and not install all of the components that they paid for. But that's at the expense of having a large single file download. And that's how it was on Cubase 10, 10.5. With Cubase 11, they broke apart the application, the instruments, the sound sets, so that you can basically install the components one by one. So that, we would have people like in remote rural locations that didn't have high-speed internet access or access to broadband, and they would spend like an entire weekend downloading a file and were very frustrated. They just wanted to get their Cubase, and then once they kind of got it up and running, to install the other components. And that's why it was kind of broken down into like a modular, so you could download each of the instruments, the sound sets, different content for plugins, all independently of each other. So hi Greg, where exactly must be the Groove Agent content folder? I'm in Windows, and again, this could be anywhere. You just want to have that, double click on the file to launch the Steinberg library manager. So it could be installed anywhere in your system, but just right click and open in Steinberg Library Manager. That will make the connection between the software and where to look for its samples. Or you could double click and that should launch a library manager and that connection will be made. Okay, so we see from JVI, so good to see you on a Hangout. Evening, Greg, love these Hangouts. Just keep learning. That's great. All right. Okay. So I see just a question from Bob Houston or Huston. Do I have to talk about what you are doing now? My question concerns Artist 11. Can you explain offline processing and flatten offline processing? So you don't have to talk about what we're doing now. So, these Hangouts are really just to answer your particular questions. Once in a while, we'll do very specific topics. Like last Tuesdays, we did a Hangout for NAMM. For the NAMM show, and that was more of a kind of a Cubase 11 overview presentation. So, but let's go ahead but for the most part, these Hangouts are really just going to be for just answering questions that you guys have. So let's see. Can you explain offline processing? So we had this question was kind of submitted earlier. So what offline processing is going to allow us to do is to, instead of running effects in real time on particular files, we could do our offline processes. So if I wanted to... A new day, what dimension am I in? So say I just have some vocals. And instead of loading up an insert effect and doing automation just for a particular part, what I could do with offline processing is I could select just a region. And some of these capabilities may vary depending on version. But if I wanted to start off just by going to processes, I could say, I wanted to do an envelope, and I could say, let's just do, straight kind of linear, fade in if I wanted to. So I could just say, okay, let's just have that file and, fade in. And that will, automatically just kind of process that particular file. Now, we could also undo that at any time, but I could choose to say, I want it to come over here to this particular I just wanted to add a delay plugin. So let's say I just want to put a delay on just that section of the file. So now as we listen to it. What dimension am I in? Oh. And then I could say I want it to take just this particular word. And let's go to maybe our studio EQ. And I just want this to sound like that one phrase. It's kind of more like a telephone. We just not do that, but let's select just that one particular phrase. And I wanted to do just a preset here. So if I wanted to just kind of do like this quick filter kind of thing that we hear in a lot of pop productions where now... New day, what dimension am I in? Oh. So that's kind of what offline processing does. Now, this will allow you to do that. And if I wanted to kind of embed all of those particular changes, so we may see this also like if we're doing Very Audio. So if I'm in Very Audio, and this is now with version 11 in Cubase Artist, I could, let's say I've done all of this vocal tuning and I'm happy kind of with the results of it. So this is actually, like if I change the pitch of these, this is actually just saying, it's playing the original audio file and then saying, oh, this is now one semitone up. We wanted to adjust the pitch, the tuning. We wanted to do this, and that will do the processing in real time. But if we wanted to come over here and choose to flatten the real-time processing so that the computer doesn't have to do all these functions. We could choose to flatten the real-time processing, and that will just play back a standard audio file for you, where basically those changes will be written into the file. So the original file will still be preserved, but that way it just kind of doesn't have to do like 14,000 different, processes in real time. You could just kind of say, I'm happy with this. Let's just, print it, be done, get it over with, just get it all applied to the file so I don't have to think about it again. So that's kind of what those two functions do. Okay, so our question is Silicon Max, which we already went over. Okay. All right, so let me just, I think I may have missed just a quick comment. Okay. Okay, so I think we're seeing, don't forget about VST Connect for jamming. It was a comment from Ambient Dave. And then I think there is further comment maybe from Miller Brown. Will that involve latency? So, VST Connect isn't necessarily intended for like a real-time jamming scenario between multiple musicians. What the intent is to really have just a way of remotely recording people into your Cubase project. So, okay, so we see Lel Sec, maybe CE, CECC. Hi, Greg, love your Hangouts. That's good. Thank you very much. I hope you find them useful. Okay. So I think we see a comment from JVI. Is there an update to the hub bug where you can no longer remove from list? It's insanely frustrating. Opening projects from their folders. So I think that will be kind of, I think that is probably going to be in the first maintenance release, which should be out soon. So all right, so we have a question. Which scale would you recommend on the loudness meter to stay within the -14 Luff's EBU 128, for example? So, when you come here, let's say if we're in our, let's say our meter section and we go to loudness, you could actually just come over here and you go to the configure the settings. So here you could actually set your integrated loudness levels, so your reference point. So there's kind of two different schools of thought for reference points. So a lot of times -23 loudness units is what's going to be kind of utilized for broadcast, and you're going to have -14, I believe, is what a lot of streaming services will use, like Spotify. So if you just set this here, so once you're in the metering, click on the loudness meter here, and then you'll see your settings. You can now just double click here and type in -14 Luffs as your reference point, and then your loudness metering will kind of be optimized for that particular level that you're going for. Okay, so we just see how can we disengage cycle mode while in record. So I'm not sure if you could do it, but let's go ahead and just take a quick look here. So let's say I'll just put it in record. So as we do this, so let me just switch my record mode. punch in, punch out. So I think, if you're in cycle record mode, it's really kind of intended to just do, to stay, directly within the cycle. And if you wanted to do, punch in and punch out, that's when you kind of use the left and right locators. And something that a lot of people miss is if you wanted to just do this to just a particular region that's independent of the left and right locators, is to select that range. And from the transport, you could go to punch points. And we can say set punch points to the selected range. So let's say if I'm in cycle record, I could still just have my loop be independent. And then as I set that up, I could just, turn on I or O just to kind of turn on punch in and punch out at those particular areas. So you could maybe toggle it back and forth between punch points and see if that gets you to where you want. But it's kind of set up like a particular recording mode. So all right, good to see sub 403 on the Hangout. Okay, so it says, hey, Greg, hey, my fellow bassheads, question. Is there a way to show more info in the mixer meter bridge? So let me just load up a quick project so we could have one that has some decent meters on it where it makes sense. Okay, so all right, so if we wanted to see our meters here, so we can see meters directly here, a couple of different areas, and we could right click and you could have different meter settings. So if you say, okay, I want it to hold forever, or different meter positions. So if you want to see the input meter or post fader, post panner. So you could do that. But if you're in a full mix console, you could also have a meter bridge up top. So you could choose to activate or just see your kind of meter bridge. And as we do this, you could right click into meter types to select, where you want those to hold forever. So, or you could also, if it's audio tracks, you could choose to have wave meters. So you could actually see what's coming. So again, you could just see our tom fills and be able to see some of your different meter types. And if you want, there's also different preferences for meter colors. So if you go to your meter display type or metering appearance, you could have different meter colors for your individual sections that you want to have. So, over 6 dB, you could, and these could be customized for each of the different metering scales. All right, hang on, my son's knocking on the door, so I think he might be on his screen break, or I think he's done with class. Hang on just 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, so my son was showing me his new Lego robot that he made, and he's done with school for the afternoon, so he's happy. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. So I just see, hi Greg, are there any future plans to offer an Ableton type session view in future versions of Cubase? So I haven't heard of any plans for that. You know, I've seen some companies kind of implement that paradigm, but it doesn't seem to have helped, you know, kind of marketing or market position. So I haven't heard of any plans, but I'm not really privy to a lot of those types of discussions. So. Okay. Okay, just going through some more comments here. All right. Okay, so I just see a question. Hi, Greg. Which one is better for recording CC for symphonic orchestra, mod wheel or expression pedal? It's really, you know, it could be whatever, you know, so depending on the type of MIDI message that the library is responding to. Some people like the modulation wheel because, you know, as kind of a paradigm, because, you know, they have more control with their hands. Some people prefer expression pedals because they can use both hands for playing parts in and get the expression with their foot. So, you know, so it's really kind of a personal preference, you know, and you could obviously take an expression pedal and remap it to modulation if that's what the library responds to, or vice versa. But, you know, really that's kind of the big differences. So, you know, I know some people are really strict. You know, like one of my friends who's probably, you know, one of the best drummers I know, who doesn't play drums and programs everything from, you know, a MIDI keyboard. You know, he's very adamant that he uses 4 fingers because a drummer only has 4 limbs. And, you know, he's like the funkiest drummer. He does, you know, a lot of work with Stevie Wonder and other people, my friend Rob Arbitier. But, you know, and he specifically limits himself to that. So some people may do like violin parts, knowing that the violin is limited in polyphony, you know, maybe double stops, you know, but primarily, or like for wind instruments, that they'll only play one voice at a time to, you know, to make it more realistic. Some people, you know, don't bind themselves to those particular paradigms. So, you know, if you're just doing like one particular voice, I would, you know, some people would use the modulation wheel because they feel it's more accurate. They have more control. You know, most people with their hands could do more precise movements. But if you need both hands for the part, that's when expression pedal is advantageous. Any remember where the folder is with my preferences, hardware ins and outs, key allocation, project settings, etc. Consider reinstalling, got way too many things, acting weird. So, you know, you could, you know, so it's different on Mac or PC. So if it's in app data on your Windows platform, on a Mac, you would go into the preferences. But one other method is just to go to your edit menu and export a profile, and then you could re-import a profile into into a different computer, or, you know, back into the same computer if you wanted to just completely kind of start from scratch. Okay, so I just see we do need a global favorites for external instruments effects in the event of a sound interface change. I often have to remap manually. So I've been trying to get like presets for those two functions and just maybe like a overall VST connections preset for a while. So I'll kind of reiterate that. All right, so you see a comment from Michael Teams having a hard time finding Steinberg CC 121. So, when we, it's kind of interesting. Like pre-pandemic, we sold so many per month, and they do kind of all the production runs based on that and hardware components. And Yamaha manufactures the CC 121, and it's usually a pretty tried and true formula to make sure we don't have excess inventory in the channel, all that fun stuff. And when COVID hit, we sold like 2 years worth of CC 121s in a month. So they don't have necessarily all the components, and some of the components are shared with other Yamaha mixers, like, the faders and stuff like that. So I think we'll see some CC 121s coming in. I'd heard earlier, maybe a couple months ago, that was February, but I'll see if I could find out if there's kind of allocation coming of CC 121s. All right. All right, so I'm reading that Pablo is a legend and a drum legend, so that's good. Play some good drum parts. All right, so you see a question: which plugin would you guys recommend in order to limit my individual channels or master in order to stay in the Spotify True Peak limits? What I would do if I did like a mix down file, so let's say I have this particular file, and it's not necessarily plugin based, but let's say I'll come and let's do an export audio mix down. And I'll just do a quick stereo mix down. And I'll insert this quickly back into the project. So I'll create an audio track. I'll do, let's say, 2441. Let's add it to the queue, and let's start our queue export. Okay. So, I wouldn't necessarily worry about individual tracks because the individual tracks aren't going to really matter so much. It's going to be the final master of what you're doing. So once you have this particular audio file that's been exported, like your final mix, what I would do, and you could do this in Wavelab or Cubase, is actually to normalize it based on different loudness standards. So I'll just go ahead. I should just chosen a smaller section, but we'll be done here in just a minute. Okay, just kind of. Okay, so once this is done, we're going to go to our audio menu to processes to normalize. So we're just about done with this. Okay, we can copy it to the project location. Okay, so let's go ahead and close. All right, so let's say we have this particular file, and what we could do now is just get to your audio menu to processes, and you'll see normalize. And at this point, you'll say peak normalization, but you could just choose loudness normalization and just say, okay, I want this to be to minus 14 luffs. And that will automatically now just make that particular mixdown file the optimum loudness. And if you wanted to, again, undo that, just like we were showing earlier, just cut or delete, right click. But again, just go to processes, and under normalize, just choose loudness normalize. And then that'll take, 99% of the guessing out of the system. So, don't think about it as an individual thing because you're not uploading individual parts to Spotify, probably would be my guess. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about a plugin solution. It's going to be more of just a quick offline process, and then that'll get you exactly to where you need to be quickly. All right, so I now see Pablo is La Leche. So Sub 403 wants people to hit the like button. So okay, so which plugin do I use for limiting? So there's a number of different limiting plugins inside of Cubase. Check out the Maximizer is a good one. So if I want to take this, I'll just so say if I want this, we could come over here and we could do it on the channel strip if you want. So, if you want kind of brick wall limiter, you could do that, but you could also go to a maximizer. And this has kind of two different algorithms. There's kind of a modern. So, if you were to bypass that. And versus kind of the classic. So, modern's kind of really intended more for maybe dance music, but it's not limited to that. So, I would check out those plugins, and you could run those as individual plugins or within the channel strip itself. All right, good to see Agent K in a Hangout. He's always nice enough to do moderation. So I don't think Jazz Dude's on the Hangouts. Haven't seen him yet, so hopefully he'll make the next one and maybe join us for the Zoom Hangout. So once again, we will be doing like maybe the last hour of Friday's Hangout. We'll try to do this once a month of having just like a little meet and greet afterwards. So you can email me. I think I saw one email come in during the Hangout. So, we'll get together so we can meet in person or via Zoom, the new meet in person mode of 2020 and 2021. So, but email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de and I can send you a link to that. Okay. So we see a question, is there a way to control the size of the final video when I export my soundtrack to video at the end of the composition and production? So it's kind of fixed at the current resolution, so you could do that, but there are a number of different video utilities, so if you need to get the video size smaller, so they kind of erred on the side of having a high quality video and not necessarily doing lots of compression to the video, but we have lots of people that use that video as kind of their final delivery format. I remember Alan Silvestri telling me that he does that, and some of the previews that we've seen for films he's been on, were just exported straight from Cubase. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, so I see DJ Mechanicom is just asking if anyone's using a Roland Jupiter XM with Cubase 11. So, all right, you see Gareth is saying he's just trying Squasher for the first time now. Impressed. Yeah, it's just a wonderful plugin. Okay, reading through more. And just seeing a lot of discussion on Spotify Luff's requirements. Okay, so a question: when editing Cubase tracks, some ways in SL Pro, then Cubase project file becomes enormously large. Sometimes I save almost 100 times. Sometimes I have a problem with file sizes, any words in the subject. So once you do processing, and a lot of times people may be doing, look in. I believe the once you start doing it through the ARA2. For spectral layers, that it will, put everything into the ARA folder, like the subfolder within the Cubase project folder. So that could be something that you may be able to not back up or archive, but so you may want to investigate that and see. But if you have examples of that, you could email me at, clubcubase@steinberg.de. So just see a comment. I come from Reason 11 to find Cubase to have many refreshing quality of life interface changes and less distractions with all the plugins, cables, etc. So. Okay. Okay, my timeline just jumped on me. Let me just get back to where I was. Okay, I don't think I lost any questions. Okay, so it's from JVI. Says, I'll simplify my earlier question. If I summon the guts to reinstall Cubase, which folder should I definitely copy to preserve all my preferences? So as I mentioned before, just come over here, save the profile. But on a Mac, you could come over here. So let's say, and I could send you the location on Windows as well. So I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC. But if we go to, you need to, on the Mac, go to your library folder. So you do that by holding down the, Alt or Option key. So I'll say, let's go to library. And then here you'll see under preferences. So you'll see preferences, and then you'll see kind of by host. And at this point, you'll see Cubase 11, and that's the folder on Mac. On Windows, if you kind of start from like the little, what was like the start menu, whatever it's called now, in the lower left-hand corner, and then you go to all applications, and you'll see like the little Cubase folder that will kind of show up in this area, not, just like when you're in the OS, like the little start globe. And then you'll see like, Cubase 11 kind of, and that will open a folder. And within that folder, you'll see just a, start Cubase 11 or application data folder. So just simply choose the application data folder. So, and then that will allow you to have all of the folders that you need. And you could do that up. But the first thing I would do is just do the profile manager, and that would, get you 99% there. All right, sorry, just have to respond to a quick text from the office. Okay, so let's move on. Thanks for your patience. All right, so we see from Daniel Uzor, my Groove Agent SE is not in my VST instruments. What should I do? So, depending on the installation, so, which version that you're running. So when you go to Groove Agent SE, so you could go to your plugin manager. So go to Studio to VST plugin manager, and you'll see VST instruments here. And then see if you see Groove Agent SE listed. It's generally by default under the drum category. So you see Groove Agent SE here. And Groove Agent, if it needs to be, if you're not seeing it anywhere, and you could also just come to, let's say, your VST, and once you click here, you could type in Groove, Groove, and you can see, okay, my Groove Agent SE. Now, if you're on 11, it could be that maybe it wasn't in, you may have to download it independently. So let's say if we come over here to our Steinberg download assistant. Okay, so let's say I'll just skip the update here real quick. But you could see kind of in the downloads for, Cubase 11. So say if I'm in 11, you could just come right over here to Cubase Pro 11. And when Gareth was talking earlier about the modular nature, these are all the different install components of Cubase 11. And you just want to make sure that you have, you could just download the Groove Agent SE plus all the different content kits that are, listed here as well. So give that a shot. But it is part of your license. So. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, is there a way to split a tempo track in Cubase whenever I compose for a cue and I get a request to change a tempo at the beginning of a cue? It messes up the sync for the whole cue. So what I would maybe do is, let's say if I'm here and I have a tempo track. Okay, so I'll activate my tempo track and let's say, this is my tempo that I've had and, I'm so happy with it, but someone needs to actually, change just a part of it. I would maybe come here and do a track version. So a lot of people don't realize this, but you could have multiple track versions for tempo. And then you could just say, let's duplicate that version. And then you could say, okay, I just need to, get rid of those. And you could say, okay, here's, tempo, the original tempo track. Here's my copy. And you could also just, now let's say I needed to get just a little bit of the tempo ramp here. So let's say I need just that much of the tempo. I could copy. So I'll just do like a Command or Control C. And let's come over here. So let's say now I want to come here and I will do a paste at origin, I think. So if you go to edit, paste time at origin, you could just have kind of your different tempo there. So try working with the track versions and see if that helps. Hang on, my son is knocking one more time. Bear with me. And also for tempo track information, sorry about that. Some other things that you could kind of play around with is, the process tempo functions. So look into that as well. And then you could kind of pick different ranges for different tempo processing calculations a lot of film composers use. Okay, so you just see the Hallian Sonic sound leading edge is very taxing on my system and my 96K, my i7 laptop with Focusrite audio interface. Can't play several notes in a row without distortion. Can something be done? So let's see if we could load that up. Okay. All right, so I'm not sure. I'll just look in all. So I don't see a preset for leading edge. So if you could let me know which particular library, sometimes you could see if it's in, which library it's in. That could be helpful. I don't have every single one, but when I just do a quick search here in all of the libraries, I don't see one. I'll just make sure I didn't have a typo. So the only thing with leading that I'm searching that I see is pleading stints. But some things you could always try is raising the buffer. Working at 96K. Sometimes is not ideal if you want it to be super, CPU efficient, but, I think you should be able to get, a couple of voices with that. But let me know. I'll look in Hallian Sonic, just in case it's Hallian Sonic versus Hallian Sonic SE. So let me just take a look at that really quick, just to make sure I didn't out clever myself, but... Okay, here it is. Sorry. All right, so I'm just going to play 8 voices of polyphony. But let's go ahead and just kind of see. Okay, so this is kind of a wavetable synthesis. So, and I'll open up my studio setup, and I'm probably at 44.1. Okay, but let me I'll just do a new program, and I'll do 96. Okay, and let me just, and so let's take a look at our audio performance. So you can see at 96K, it could take some of your CPU cycle, so that's kind of hitting it pretty hard. But let's go ahead and see if we adjust our buffer. It's pretty intense when you're doing, the wavetable synthesis like that. So, but I'll just go ahead and increase my buffer. So I'm at 256. So let's say if I do 512. So it might be one that you may have to just kind of render, because it is, once you start getting into a lot of different wavetable synthesis as well, that could be, you know, pretty complex for doing that. So, and, you know, so there could be all sorts of and one other thing that you could try is if you come here, you could actually choose to, let's say once we have, I'll just go to record a part. And sometimes this helps with samples. It may not work so much for synthesis. But let's say if I come here and I don't, let's go to the options page here. So one of the things that you could do inside of, so I'm just going to put the multi-core on. So I'll just say 6 cores within Halion Sonic. All right, so let's see if that, I may have to restart it, but you could also try to set the amount of preload and come over here and try to, you know, make sure that you're activating, that you have the multi-core set up in the operation. But it could be like, yeah, it seems like it's a fairly intense patch, but I'll kind of mention that to see if there's anything wrong with that. But, you know, once you start getting into, you know, the virtual wavetable synthesis, that could take a lot. So sorry about that. Hello, Greg. Is it possible to draw volume changes on an audio clip like in Studio One or Pro Tools using clip gain, like draw volume ramps or turn up low recorded words? So yeah, we'll show you how to do that. I think we did that well, you know, for a long time. So let's say if I wanted to come here, so all you have to do is just grab the pencil tool. And then you could just kind of draw in just like that and say, okay, I want my volume down. So, and then you could just do that, and that's going to be fader. So you could actually kind of use that to regulate different volumes before it hits the compressor, so you don't have to do everything. So just kind of draw in your volume changes, and then you're able to just kind of have everything set up just that easily. You could also just grab like the range selection tool, and if you hit Shift X, then you could also, you know, just say, okay, this word, like, you know, let's say that's a breath, hit Shift X, and then you could just grab the center and be able to add, I think, 26 dB of gain directly there as well. All right, it says my Cubase is kind of brownish. I hate it, laughing out loud. So if you don't like color schemes, you can, there's lots of different coloring options. So if you want to go to color schemes, you could say, okay, the project area background, I want, you know, the project area background to be lighter. You know, you could do stuff like that as well, and, you know, modify a lot of different functions. We want to make sure that you could, you know, because we have users that look at Cubase for, you know, 18 hours a day. So we want to make sure that their eyes aren't bulging out of their head from too much contrast. So, and Gareth has his apparently set up in sky blue pink with polka dot stripes. So it's good to know. Maybe his daughter set it up for him. All right. All right, so does Cubase 11 have all of the sample packs from previous versions? I have Cubase from version 3 and also Sequence, and want to know if I have everything I should in Media Bay. So from version 3, there wasn't really a lot of content, like sample packs, but, you know, as it goes on, all those sample packs from, you know, loops, I think a lot of the loops started coming in maybe version 7 was a lot of loops, if memory serves. So it was around 2009. No, 2012. So and all of those loops are still, and presets are still available in Cubase. So okay, so I see a question. Are there major changes if I upgrade? I'm so used to the 7.5 version. You know, it'll function basically the same way. You know, a big change for a lot of people was like the mixer in going from 6.5 to 7 was a new mixer. So it took people a little while to kind of get their head around that because it was kind of a lot of new paradigms and new concepts. But the core functionality is identical. And once you go to Cubase 11, your Cubase 7.5 still runs. So you still have that, you know, installed on your system. So that's completely intact. And your Cubase 11 license will just run previous versions. So you can go back to, I think, to Cubase SX, you know, version 1.0 and still run it on your Cubase 11 license. So your 7.5 will be completely intact and you're not going to lose anything, and you could always jump back if you need to in an emergency. Okay. Okay, question in drum editing. I edit toms by cutting the event when cymbals hit by using F7 and applying a high cut to reduce spill in close mics. Unfortunately, Cubase produces clicks and artifacts every time. So what I would do, if you're, so a lot of times, you know, you may want to, you know, if you're doing that, one of the functions that you can activate so that anytime that there's like, you know, any processing, you know, there's a couple of things to look out for that could help mitigate that. So let me just revert. Okay, so as you do like an audio edit, and let's say if you do it in the file, make sure that you have snap to zero crossing activated, and you could do this on the main project window or in the sample editor. So make sure that you have snap to zero crossing turned on, and that way, you know, it's only going to make the cut. So let's say if we're looking at like our snare top here, so I'll just come directly here. So when zero crossing is active, it will wait until it will only do the edits where it's at the zero axis in a waveform. So like right here, right there, but it's not going to make a cut. So let's say I turn my snap off and I go to cut. It's only going to make the actual cut at where there's a zero axis crossing point. So I would make sure that you have that done and those applied. So it seems like so when you edit toms by, let's say, by cutting the event where there's cymbals hit by using F7 and applying a high cut to reduce the spill, So I would, there's probably other things that you could do to kind of mitigate that as well. So, while you have, let's say a cymbal crash and you don't want that kind of bleeding into the toms, I would just maybe take that particular area and just split. And instead of doing an offline process, I would just kind of bring down the levels perhaps on stuff like that, or just using the noise gate and just kind of using particular frequencies on your noise gate to really do, because I don't know many people, so I know people do a lot of drum editing and they kind of do alternate methods to kind of clean that up. Yeah, and one other point to do is all right, so it says he has auto fades enabled. So all right, so let me just see. Just seeing a kind of a comment from Denny, a rough estimate for upgrade. So the upgrades, I don't know where you live. So, the upgrade prices, I think from, Cubase 10.5 to 11, it was $99 and maybe $59, going from like 10 to 10.5. So, there are different kind of upgrade options available, but I don't want to assume, like what country you're based in. Okay. So let me just move on. Okay, so I just see a question. I bought Cubase 10.5 Pro last summer. Feels bad to step in too early for the next version. 11 apparently. Why no year or half year grace period to upgrade real cheap? We do a 30-day grace period. So, I think, what you get for 10.5 to 11 for, what if you think of Squasher, getting a dynamic EQ, getting the batch export, getting, lots of great content libraries, that it's a pretty reasonable deal. I think it's very reasonable. But, there are promotions throughout the year, but sometimes, for people that just have purchased their Cubase 11 update, we don't want to have a discount. People are, well, why don't you do a Black Friday? It's like, all the people that have just purchased it don't necessarily want to, feel, we don't want to, devalue, their purchase as well. So, you probably got your version 11 in the summer, probably on a discount. So you could think of that, and, maybe you could do something similar like that. Okay, so just see about the chord track note length was not related to instrument release, because once dragged into Midi track, it was obvious that the note length was different. So let's take a quick look. Sorry for misunderstanding, but let's see if I... Let's see if I have... Okay, so I'll just take these three chords and let's come over here. I'll drag it down. right, and let's say if I put an R chord in here, let's say I'll just duplicate these. So it looks like it's kind of holding it for 2 bars, but if you have a specific project neurotic nexus that it's kind of behaving kind of inconsistently for you, feel free to send me a link and see if it's, if I could get it recreated. Okay, so what is the difference between Cubase Pro version and Elements? So we could think of Elements as being kind of a subset of the features. I think it's 64 tracks or 48 tracks of audio, whereas Cubase Pro is going to be unlimited. You'll have more plugins as so there's Elements, Artist, and Pro. So as you kind of work up, there's more functionality. So you may have like a basic tuning plugin, but Artist and Pro will have kind of graphic vocal tuning with Very Audio. So, Cubase Pro will have more scoring features, more instruments, more content, more plugins. So, and there's pretty detailed, comparison charts on Steinberg.net. So you could kind of see, if you're looking for particular functions, but if you don't see a particular function, and you want to know if it's in the Elements version and are kind of priced accordingly, because there's a lot of people that want like a Cubase to start at. That's like around $100. So we have something at that price point and kind of going up from there as well. Okay, so I just see, I'm not sure if this is directed to me. What computer are you using? So I'm currently running just a MacBook Pro. I think it's an i9 with 32 gigs of RAM. Running Mojave as my OS. So we see a 2.9 gigahertz Core i9, 32 gigs of RAM. So it was kind of, I've had it a little over a year now. So we had to kind of keep our laptops for, I think, 2.5 years, at least in 4 through the office. So that's what I'm kind of using. Okay, so I see Sable Winters got her Zoom invite for Friday's post hangout. So all right, so I just see I'm so torn whether to jump ship to Logic or keep using 10.5 until they update 11 to work with either Rosetta or M1. Thoughts and opinions, check out, you may see stuff in your Steinberg news feed soon. So, just, wait a couple days and you might have some more information. Okay. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to export the tempo track as a MIDI file? I was using Easy Bass Audio Tracker to generate a bass sequence from a guitar track, and it had options to import tempo from MIDI file. So yeah, you could definitely do that. So when you go to export your MIDI file, you may have to actually have just a blank MIDI part. So you may just have to have a MIDI track. So let's just say you have a MIDI track here, and it might just have to be, so at this point, Let's say if I did I'll just do a new project. So let's say if I have a tempo track, all right, so we could export this, but you may not, if you go to export, you may not see anything activated. But if we add just a quick MIDI track, and we may have to just put like one single note in. So now I just need a MIDI part. Now we could export a MIDI file, and that MIDI file can contain the tempo track. And there's some preferences to be aware of, because I think when you import a MIDI file, the default preference may be to ignore the master track events on merge. So you may want to not have that checked. I think by default this is checked on importing of MIDI files, but you could export a MIDI file, but you may need just to have a blank container part. But the MIDI and markers can be exported as part of a standard MIDI file. Hi, can you set channel strip to be pre-insert by default when opening a new project? So it's going to kind of be how it is. So I don't think it could be changed by default, but you can, obviously, for people that aren't used to this, so a lot of people may start off with a template where all of those particular tracks, or just saving tracks from a project, or starting with a template where it'll be the reverse. So if you're not familiar with this concept, like if we have a bunch of processing in our channel strip, and we had a bunch of insert effects, and we wanted to change the signal flow order between these, we could now just come over here and put the channel strip before the inserts, or the inserts before the channel strip, just by kind of clicking right here. So that would change the signal flow order, but it doesn't kind of do it by default. So, but many people will start off with a template, and you could have that actually stored within the template. Okay, so we see Ambient Dave is 4 thumbs up for Greg's Hangouts and my invaluable knowledge. So glad it's helpful. Thank you, Ambient Dave. Okay, so from Fred Robinson, question. I have Cubase 11 Pro, a MacBook Pro with external SSD. I have Cubase 11 on a MacBook, and libraries and projects on the external SSD. Is this the best optimal way? So that works fine. Sometimes you realize that, you don't have, it's not as easy to update the, your SSD inside of the computer. So a lot of people will just have all of their projects and all their libraries for instruments just on an external drive. And, there's a lot of great, external SSD drives. A lot of people, I think, use a Samsung, like T5, I think it is. But, it's a very common way to do it. So, ideally in a huge system, you may, if you're doing lots of audio and lots of VST instruments, you may want to break apart VST instruments from audio files, but and that was kind of probably more relevant 15, 20 years ago. I don't think it's a huge issue now. So that's a great way to work, having both your audio files and your libraries on a separate drive. As long as the drive's handling it fine, then you're all good to go. Okay, so good to see Onoa checking in. Okay, we see comment from Gregory D. Brown. I'm new to Cubase. I have Cubase Pro 11. This is so helpful. Thank you. So I'm glad it's helpful. If you have any questions, please, let us know. And, make sure you give a thumbs up and you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, so it says we see comment, love these hangouts. Don't get a chance to watch live too often, but later in the PM usually. Always learn something, even though I've been using Cubase since SX in the Loha organ. So thanks for kind words. Glad it's helpful. And I think I learned something new in every hangout as well. So. All right, just reading through comments. So lots of people having kind of their libraries on SSD drives, finding that it works well. All right, just reading through comments. So lots of people are liking our SSD drives. I got all of my libraries kind of on SSD. I've been negligent for a long time. Got it done a couple months ago. So working much better. Okay. Okay, so you see question. Hello, can I lower the pre-gain of all the channels with one click altogether, not one by one in the mix console? So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so say if I go into my mix console here. All right, so say if I go to my pre, so I'll just select all my audio tracks here. We'll give this a shot. I think we can. So I'm going to hold down enable Q-Link. So it's Alt Option plus Shift, and now you could adjust the gain here from the pre section for every single track simultaneously. All right, so we have a question, how to put an echo on sound. Okay, so if you wanted to just put it like an echo on a particular audio file, so I think we did that just a little bit a while ago, but we'll do it one more time. So let me just revert this particular project. Okay, so let's say we have, this for, let's say, our vocal going on. A new day, what dimension am I in? Oh. Okay, so let's say I just want to put a delay just on like that portion. So I'm just going to select it with the range tool and go to plugins from the audio menu. And we could just choose delay. So I'll just put a mono delay. And I'll just do a quarter note. And if I have auto apply turned on, that will automatically just render that for you. So. A new day. What dimension am I in? So now that will just play back that delay rendered. A new day. So that's how you could do it pretty easily. And then, the beauty of this system is you could hit F7 again, and at any time in your production process, unless you specifically choose to freeze it, you could go back and delete the process and you have the original file completely intact. So give that a shot. Okay, so other topic, did anyone successfully obtain an upgrade for Cubase AI? I had a DAC from my UR22 and activated it with Cubase AI 10.5. Now wondering if there's any chance to get 10.5 AI to 11. So usually the OEM versions are kind of based upon what you activated at. Periodically, they may do, I think we had, several million Cubase LE customers that were earlier versions. So periodically there are promotions that will allow you to upgrade from LE to, to a later version. I think some of them might have been $10. I could be totally wrong. Like to get the current version of your OEM product in case, sometimes the hardware could be in a channel for a long time. And it's, 3 operating systems too old and it's been sitting in some warehouse somewhere. So they'll occasionally do that. But as a general rule of thumb, I don't think that the AI or LE versions that you upgrade to that, you could upgrade from your 10.5 AI to LE or to Elements rather, not to LE, but to Elements. So you could do that. But a lot of times, it's the LE and AI, there isn't an upgrade path for that other than kind of jumping into like the Elements level. Okay, so just see, hi Greg, after doing tempo detection, how do I keep the tempo at a fixed tempo? Can I remove the tempo track after the tempo is set? Thanks. So I'll show you how to do this. Okay, so let's say I wanted to do a tempo map of this. So we have no correlation between the two. So I'm going to come over here and do a quick tempo detection. And I'll do an offbeat correction. So what I want to do now is to embed these tempo changes into the file itself. So at this point, I'll go to Audio, to Advanced, and I'll just say Set Definition from Tempo. And we could write that into the file or into the project. And now I could just deactivate the tempo track. So now, like, the tempo track is being ignored because we told it not to follow the tempo track, but you could also just come directly to the tempo track and say new version and just kind of activate the tempo track on this new track version. So think of it like a parallel, and now let's start to speed up. And you say, right at this point, I want it to be faster and steady. So you could do stuff like that. So, once you have the tempo map, go to audio, and you want to just go to advanced and set definition from tempo. And then what you could, totally disconnect the tempo. You could erase the tempo, come up with a new tempo track, and it will just automatically stick to whatever tempo you have. All right. So let's just see. So question, will Nuendo Cubase ever have multi-touch capability for touchscreen laptops or screens? So, I think it's, I know that there's been discussion and investigation into it. Currently there, on the Mac OS, there isn't, there isn't any multi-touch support. So, the problem gets to be, do you develop a whole system now and then have it not be compatible with any future stuff that could happen on both platforms? So they try to make everything a bit platform, independent or almost agnostic, if you will. So, to develop something so deeply for one platform that, the other platform doesn't have, or may have a completely different approach to it, could be problematic. So I think that's some of the hesitation, but, there's lots of people doing, third-party solutions, but, they're aware of that. But, so we'll just have to see what both main operating systems will do. All right, so I see some from Jam Tracks Reunion. Thanks on your Glide demo today. I was trying to get that exact effect on the bass similar to an Ariana Grande song. Thank you. Next. Wait, doesn't Cubase 11 have new pitch bend editing? So one of the things that, like, when we were, we'll occasionally go out to different studios and talk to artists and just kind of pick their brain on, what they want to see, little workflow frustrations, like, oh, my fantasy feature would be this. No one's doing this, and I really want to do this, this, and this, and connect these 4 different workflows together. So, and one of the ones in our discussions, I think this was specifically with Zed and, Team Zed, was when we come over here to, let's say, MIDI data, there's 16,384. I think 128 times 128 values for pitch bend. So the problem is, and if you draw pitch bend data in on a particular track, that as you do this, one of the options that you have now is, once we do pitch bend, is you could choose to, set the pitch bend range. So we could, show a semitones grid, and we could match the pitch bend range, based on the actual instrument itself. So a lot of times people may have been kind of drawing in pitch bend, and they didn't really have like a reference of where it was hitting that, so they may do a whole part and realize that they're slightly flat or slightly sharp when they're doing that. So one thing that Zed and his team was just really wanted was the ability to come here and say, okay, I'm going to go from here to here. And as I do this, I want that to pitch bend, not flat into the note, but right onto the note. So that now we could have this snap to the pitch, and you could just have that pitch bend editing as well. So we want to go, and have those pitch bends go to a known entity, regardless of what the pitch bend range is for the instrument. So if one instrument is set for an octave, the other instrument is set for, a whole tone, that you could set those independently on each track. So that was like one of the big things to kind of, make pitch bend editing, which is a very kind of, nebulous area within the MIDI specification, but to be able to do that more musically was a big change. So. So we see a question. All right. So I just see a comment from Neurotic Nexus, probably with touchscreens, probably only if Apple decides to discard the keyboard support for next Mac generation. Never mind, just kidding. So yeah, you get where we're coming from. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to render in place, freeze a track with sidechain intact, guitar track with compressor triggered by Vox? When I do this free track, it seems the sidechain disables. I believe it's still disabled. I know it's something. It could be very complex to do. But let's take a look, see if we come up with a workaround. I believe it's still kind of disabled with that. So let's get a scenario set up. Okay, so I'll just set up like a bass and a kick in kind of a typical side chain. So let's say I have so I'll just take this particular synth part and let's activate the side chain. So I'll see if this kind of works just for that. So close this. Okay, so I'll just try for like an audio part. So let's just say I'll do a render in place. I'll do the complete signal path. Yeah, so that didn't do it. So, but let's see if I have this set. So let's say if I have this track routed to a group. So say a stereo group. Okay, so as we do this. So I'm going to send this out to the group. And let me just add an audio track. And I want to set this input to the group. And I'll just record. So now if you kind of route it out to a group and do kind of a real and set an audio track as that group input, that will allow you to do kind of to print the result, the resulting file of the side chaining. So give that I know it's not a render in place function, but if you wanted to turn that into an audio file, that's a way to get it done. So I know it's a couple of extra steps, but give that a shot. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, does anyone know how to hear beat by itself and not your own voice on Bitwig when recording? So I don't know Bitwig, so maybe if there's a Bitwig hangout, you could ask there. So sorry. I'm probably not the best person to ask, but maybe someone else could chime in. Okay, I have a question. I have Cubase 10.5 LE on my Windows laptop. Someone has kindly given me an iMac. Can I somehow also run this same version on my new Mac without any license problem, or how to go about it? So if you want to take your Cubase 10.5 LE, If you don't want it to use it on your PC anymore, you could, there is a way if you go to the Steinberg website to get a new license activation for like a new computer. So you could do that, but you have kind of one license that you can go back and forth. You could also purchase a USB-E licenser key and transfer the license to the USB-E licenser and move that back and forth if you wanted to. Hey, I have a question. How do I bounce selection in Cubase 11? So if I had a bunch of audio files that were separated like this, and I wanted to bounce the selection, I could select these, go to audio to bounce selection and I could replace. And now what was a bunch of independent files is now automatically one contiguous audio file as opposed to a series of independent files in the timeline. All right, sorry, my timeline just jumped on me. Let me find my spot. Okay, can you show something about chord tracks, Apache, and the new scales function working together? Okay, so let's see if we can tie all those together quickly. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Hope everyone's learned something new. And if you make sure that you've hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that again. And again, on Friday, we'll be doing just a hangout for about 3 hours instead of 4. We'll take the last hour and kind of do a live Zoom meet and greet. So send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de and I'll be happy to send you the link to that. So, all right, so let's say if I want to. Okay, so I have a bass patch here. All right, so we want to do chord track, Arpeggi. So let's say I'll go to my MIDI inserts and I'll just put an Arpeggi. And this is like a real-time kind of arpeggiator. So I could just come over here. So let's say I'll just hold down a chord. All right, so let's see how we can tie these all together in a creative way. All right, so I'm going to add a chord track. Okay, so I'll just add a quick. Okay, and all right, so let's say I have just a quick chord progression here. So I'll just. Okay, so I have my chord track, and let's say I wanted to take these chords and route them to the retro log patch. And the retro log patch is now just going through So this retro log is now going into these chords are going into retro log, and it's being kind of just automatically generated within the Apache here. So let's say I'm doing this and I see that I want it to be maybe E minor, let's say an E major chord here. So I'm going to go to the scale assistant and I could say, okay, I want this to be in the key of E. All right. And I could use what's based on the chord track or the scale assistant. So now when I'm in the scale assistant, I could just kind of look at this. So, and we could choose to kind of base our coloring based on the chords here. So I could see that like this A sharp is not fall within the chord. So I could actually automatically just come here and I could say, let's quantize all the pitches. Or I could just make sure that the notes are going to be in the right key just based upon the color as I drag around. So this way I could only choose, you know, if I say we want to snap pitch editing, I could only move these particular notes to within the chord itself. Or I could come right over here and just say I want to show only the pitches from the scale assistant. So I could choose to do that, or show only pitches that have events. So this way you can make sure that as you're doing different things, you know, if maybe you just didn't like the chord, or you know it's okay and you just want kind of a chord that has more color harmonically, you could make those decisions. So hopefully that makes sense. You see Pablo's getting dinner. I see comment Greg trash talking Win 10 with whatever it's called now. So I like Windows 10 actually. So where can I send questions? So you could always send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or just ask them in the comments field here. Okay, so I think we did the bounce selection question already. So okay, so I just see, hello, I've noticed in Cubase 11 Pro, a problem with GUI scaling on-off. High DPI doesn't work for 125 to 200% scaling on 1080p monitors. The only thing working is resizing to 100%. So if you have a 1080p monitor, it's not going to be a high DPI. So that's probably why it's not working. You don't have a high DPI monitor. So so there's no need to turn it on. So that is when you take like 4K is basically, you know, 4 times the resolution of 1080p. So that allows you to do the scaling. So if your monitor or your display isn't set for high DPI, that's why, you know, the scaling doesn't work, because there's nothing to scale down to, because you're at 100% basically already. So hope that makes sense. All right, and then it says, I remember Cubase 10.5 is working well on many notebooks. The GUI was scaling to 100% for some users. It worked fine. Not exactly. Will there be an update fixing this issue? So I don't, you know, so yeah, so once again, it's, you know, if you don't have a high DPI monitor, then, you know, the scaling resolutions, you know, aren't intended for that task. There's nothing to scale down from, you know, if your 1080p is the maximum resolution. So All right, does Cubase 11 still support rewire function with Reason 11? Didn't seem to work for me the first time around, but I was able to get Reason Studios as a VST plugin, which changes my known environment. So I think the rewire is really kind of, seen its time. And it's, I think with Propeller Heads saying, oh, maybe we should do it as a plugin and as a VST plugin. So I'm not sure if Reason 11 supports rewire. Or if it's kind of abandoned technology, I'm not sure, but Cubase does still support rewire. So yeah, so you see someone else is saying that they're running it fine in Cubase 11 with other programs. All right, so we see Jazz Dude on a Hangout. Good to see you. All right, good to see Grant Nicholas on the Hangout. I hope you're doing well. I see Walter Blackledge is saying the upgrade to 11 is worth the money. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to tell Cubase what track to put bounced MIDI result on? I'm trying to merge 3 lanes into one MIDI lane or track. I'm unable to get this to work consistently. So let me just... I'll show you a trick. You may know this, but in case you don't. So if I have, let's say I'll just... All right, so let's say I have this MIDI part, and maybe I have another part here. So let's say I'm copying different parts. So if I copy a part, just hold down the Alt. And if you accidentally move, so hold down the Alt key and move it up. And then if you hold down Alt or Option and then Command or Control, you can snap it to the part. So now these parts are kind of layered on top of each other. If you grab the glue gun and hold down the Alt key or Option key, they'll now all be kind of on, all those parts will be merged just like that. So that's how I would do it. So give that a try. Let us know. Okay, so I just see, what is this guy doing? Don't hear any music. So, we're just answering questions for people on their Cubase and Steinberg products. Okay, so you see Neurotic Nexus is checking out. So hopefully we'll see you Friday night. Okay, so I see Fred Robinson is like, yep, I have a Samsung T5 as my external SSD. How did you guess, Greg? So it's a popular one, as you probably know. All right, so I see my audio crossfade is grayed out. Do you know how I can activate it? So let me just drag a loop in here. Okay, so let's say, all right, so let me just, so sometimes, crossfade could be grayed out if nothing or the wrong type of media is selected. So if there's nothing to actually crossfade, so if I come here and select an audio event, I can see the crossfade, but if I select not the event, but just a track, then the crossfade won't be there. So if I just want to come here, I could just say, okay, let's crossfade. So I could take these two events that are, overlapping, or adjacent to each other, and now it's just going to hit crossfade between the two events. But it may be just grayed out because of what is or is not selected. So just, so once again, if there's nothing selected that could be crossfaded, it's not going to be an available option. So make sure you have something selected. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. What are Cubase templates? Could you please talk about them? So what a template is you could set up kind of like your starting off point for Cubase. So many composers will painstakingly go through all their different sounds and say, I'm going to use this string patch, and I could use that for this scenario, and this is my oboe sound, and this is my long oboe sound. This is my short. This is, I need a whole area of pads, and they will set up kind of like a known starting off point, because the last thing that composers often want to do is to actually go through and spend 80% of their time searching for sounds when they know that they have them. So they'll load up their sounds in templates. Or if you're working with bands, let's say you're recording at your church, you could say we have 16 inputs, and we want to do this, and we're going to broadcast this live. And I want the same setup when I go next time. So what we could do is set up those different starting off points as a template. So we would just come right over here and save as template. So I could say, okay, we're going to come and say, this is my, January 26th. 2021 template. So now when I start my Cubase, I could come right over here and just say, okay, I want to start a new project, and I could choose my templates and say, okay, here's my template that I'm starting off with, and we could activate the project, and everything is kind of good to go. Now, word of advice, it's probably a good idea when you have a template to decouple it from any MIDI notes, decouple it from audio files, decouple it from audio files that are in the pool. I see some people will erase everything, and every time I start, I have these missing audio files messages from my template. It's because the template is still referencing audio files. So just a little word of advice there if you wanted to work with that. So I just see, hi there, any chance you guys dropped the e-licenser or moved to some software-based licensing? And ours did, and ours too. It's just so frustrating still have this dongle just for Cubase. They're looking into different systems. It's obviously a huge thing where, many people like having the dongle and the security of that, especially when having to reauthorize computers and set up new systems and work in different environments. But so they are looking into that. So, and we also have to make sure that we're able to still stay in business and produce software that, we're able to realize revenue from, so we could bring new features as well. But, your feelings on the subject are noted, and people are working actively on kind of a solution for that. So. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Hi, Greg. Is there any way of moving the track configurations option to the top bar into the lower bar to free up some space? So let me just... So I'm just seeing where the track configurations, maybe I'm just having a brain cramp. So if you could let me know which, it seems like I think I'm just having a brain cramp on the track configurations. If you could maybe give me a little more information, that would be helpful. And when you say the top bar, is it like the, let me just see if I'm, just seeing anything's jogging my memory. But so let me know if, okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to see the DSP load on your UR28M or other Steinberg interface? So the DSP is kind of fixed, depending upon the number of inputs. So every input you could have, one, you could have, to the insert, so you could choose to have like the morphing channel strip or the guitar amps, and you could monitor, with the reverb. So it's kind of fixed depending on the number of inputs and outputs that you have. So since it can't be reallocated, it's kind of fixed, based upon the inputs and outputs. That's why you don't really see a meter, because it's kind of known exactly what DSP is available. Okay, so we see Fred Robinson has to kind of check out. So we'll hopefully see you on the next Hangout. And please join us for the Zoom Hangout after the Hangout. Okay, is it possible to copy an audio quantization and apply the same to another sample? So let's take a look. So let's say if I have this particular feel that I like, I could come over here and just kind of determine the amount of slices here. So I'm going to figure out those slices, and then I could create groove. So if I wanted to come here, let's say, okay, and I needed to move, let's say I go and do some audio warp stuff. So I could do some free warping and say, okay, I need this here, that, this, I adjust these different things. And at this point, I could just say, I want to take this and apply this quantization to it. So I'll go to my quantize setup, and I'll just say, let's put on audio warp quantize. And now I could quantize, and that would take the quantized, groove or the feel, the quantized preset that's been extracted from this, and I could apply it to another one. So give that a shot. Okay, so let me just load up in our project here. Excuse me, I just clear my throat. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you talk about timing corrections in a multi-track live recording, drumming mistakes with bleeding and a bass, a little sloppy, guitar completely out of time? Thanks. All right, so let's take a look at this. So let's say at this point I have, I'll just revert. So say, we gave the musicians a click track, and maybe the drums kind of weren't as tight as we would like. So say we do the dreaded thing, and we'll play the drums kind of locked with the click track, what every drummer hates you to do in the studio. So I'd say, okay, that fill wasn't so good. All right, so that snare fill is it sped up, it kind of came out, so the tempo kind of fluctuated a bit there. So what I want to do is I'm just going to find the hit points of these particular files for my drums. And what I want to do is to, make sure that we're not having the tracks that are bleeding through. So I'm going to go to my snare track. And again, adjust the threshold so that we have our snare hits predominantly and not tracks that are bleeding through. Let's go to our hi-hat. And let's go ahead and kind of do the same here because this song is kind of based around hi-hat. So we'll adjust the threshold kind of accordingly because you have tracks that will kind of always kind of bleed through. And so I'll adjust my threshold down just a little bit here. All right, so what I want to do is I place these into a folder. And I can now just apply this function called group editing. So now, as I want to do quantizing of my drums, I could set my priority. Let's say I want my kick to be the highest priority. And I want my snare to be maybe second highest priority. And let's find, scroll down, let's find our hi-hat. So what I want to do now is I'm going to just slice the audio. And why we slice the audio is we want it to actually create like thousands of little slices. And we create these slices because when we hit the snare's in the snare mic, the tom mic, the hat mic, the kick. I'm going to choose to quantize this to 16th notes. So let's go ahead and just kind of jump back here. And then I'm just going to hit quantize. And as we do this and we zoom in, it's going to create gaps. And you can hear these gaps. So we can see them visually. Okay, so I don't necessarily like that. So what I want to do is to apply the crossfade to all of the gaps. And now it's going to apply the crossfade. So we just kind of cleaned up the drums very easily. So we made the drums tight to the click track. Now, if we get into situations where maybe we have to clean up a guitar or bass part, I would just... So let's say, okay, our bass was, let's get like, super duper picky and, let's be anal about our edits. So I'm going to come right over here and I could just double click on the bass part and we could do this. And instead of hit points, I'm just going to go to my audio warp to free warp. So I just was doing some editing for someone. So let's say the bass here was, this note was late. So we could kind of put an anchor point here. So once we get into free warp and I could just say, I want to put an anchor point maybe after. And what I want to do is to have this note, that fall right on the beat. And we could adjust kind of the timing. So, kind of place an anchor point after and before, and then you could just reposition notes quite easily. So I was cleaning up a bass player that kept missing a downbeat and, just kind of would put, my anchor points, and these anchor points and these warp markers could be based on the hit points. And then you could just do, say, oh, this is a little early, a little late. They missed the downbeat. The drums anticipated a little bit, but the bass player was on beat, but I want the bass to match the anticipation of the drums. And you could do the same thing with guitars as well. So give that a shot. All right. And my timeline just jumped on me. Bear with me just a second. And I know we'll... Okay. Okay, so I see a question from JVI. Silly question, why can I only see sustain pedal inside the MIDI instrument channel editor? I can't see it as a controller. Lane data in project window. I thought this was fixed, but don't see it. So let's go ahead and I'll just do a quick project here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learning a tip or trick. If you have, go ahead and, all right, so here's my lovely template that I've created. All right, so let's say I have a MIDI part. Okay, and I want to, let's go to, say, our sustain pedal. Or I'll just get a real piano part here that has sustain on it. Someone that can play piano properly. Okay, so let's say I want to see my sustain information here. Okay, so there's my sustain. Okay, so why can't I see this controller lane data in the project window? So it could be that we have to all right, so there we could see it kind of in the controller lane right there. So we can see the sustain pedal information. So let's say if we just
you stare at the ground, not a sound. Tell me why.
so and you know there's also different settings to check out, so it looks like you know we can kind of see that there, but you could also go to your CC automation setup, and so let's say if you want to see CC67 as automation tracks, so you know, and then once you're kind of here, we should be able to you know, see that as, let's say, you know, automation. So let's say, I think if we go to F6, so you could kind of see the sustain message there. So, you know, so give that a try and let me know if I'm doing something differently. But, you know, this is generally automation data. This is MIDI CC data. So you may have to kind of have those two, you know, tell it to snap. So okay, hi Greg. Is there a way to snap MIDI data to grid when duplicating? For example, select multiple notes and duplicate them and have the duplicate snap to grid. You know, so if we want to, let's say if I switch this over, let's look at this particular part. So let's say I'll just come. Okay, so if I wanted to select, you know, these particular notes, and I think what this question is probably related to. So if I come here and I just duplicate, it will duplicate, but it duplicates the events to right after the event, which is often not what people want. They may want to duplicate the measures. So there is an editor. I think it's Command or Control Shift plus I, which is the in-place editor. And this will allow you to use the range selection tool. So at this point, I could just say, okay, I want it to just use the range tool for these two measures. And now when I duplicate, like Control or Command D, it'll duplicate the range, including kind of the rests. So that way it could be on the grid. All right. You can set your bars and beats to start at, say, -8 bars, or so to speak. Have bar 1 8 bars later. If you now get a ruler track, can you set the counter to start beat 1 at 0.0 seconds as well? So it's kind of the permutations can be a little confusing with this, but let's go ahead and take a look. Just do, let's say, new project. Okay, I'll just do a new project and not start from my random template. Okay, so let's say I have like an audio event here. Okay, and I will add a ruler track. Okay, so let me just... Okay, so right now we're at measure 1, but our time is set to 0 seconds. So if I wanted to do my offset, I think we'd go to... so let's say if I wanted this to be... all right, so let's say we want to do this at -8. And this can be a little confusing, so I understand. So let's say if I want to give an 8-bar display offset. Okay, so now as we do this, and these little questions are kind of critical, and you may have to play around with this. All right, so right now we have this at 0. So this is now we have -8 bars. We have this, but if you want this time, there's... Let me just see if I can remember. It's like when it was... All right, let me just try from the setup. So I may have to play around with this some more, but let's say... So now we're at 16 seconds. So let's say we're at 16 seconds. So I will come over here. Let's do a display offset, and let's try set this for 16. So I think that kind of did it. So that set that point right here at 0 for your time and bar 1. So just do the setup, and this is kind of what I had set up. So I set the display bar offset to 8, and I set the display time offset to 16. And I derived that value from where the time was at the position of the event. So give that a shot and see if that works. So we see, can our Apache be used like a note repeat as an MPC and also as a swing percentage? So you could, there's other stuff that you could do for note repeats. So let's say if I have, so let's say if I wanted to, there is a MIDI echo plugin, I think. So, the full Groove Agent will have like all sorts of different repeat functions. So let's say if I wanted to come here, we could just say, okay, I want to take this and so we could just choose to, okay, I don't want to do any, how many repeats that you want to do, length, delay. I don't think that there's, so let's say 16th notes. So I may not, let's say if I just wanted to trigger this via MIDI, so give me just a second and but you could do this, but the full version of Groove Agent will have kind of very much MPC style of percentages. And if you want to do swings on top of that, you could just go to the quantizer plugin and be able to kind of just adjust your swing feel there. Okay, so from JVI, on the chord track, what does the enharmonic shift 3 possibilities do? Auto flat to sharp. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So say I want to put in a B flat, but maybe I wanted. So, automatic can kind of be based upon a key, but if I, like occasionally, like earlier, I'd put in a chord that was, listed as G flat, but if I wanted that to be A sharp to be musically correct, or B flat, or just kind of to be in automatic mode, and that could kind of determine based on the other keys. So if you start off in F major, it would, if the first chord was F, then it would probably, be set up for, to do B flat as opposed to A sharp. So those are just kind of make sure that you have the correct harmonic, possibilities. So auto will kind of look at it in context, and, flat will take a sharp chord to a flat, and sharp will take a flat chord and harmonically switch it to flat. So. Okay, does anyone here have any tips for correcting latency with samples? I have some spiccato contact instances, and they don't seem to be on a beat due to sample cut in. So, most of the time, you could try to, sometimes you may have latency based upon like effects that are in the project. So if you have like, limiters and expanders on the master bus, you could try to turn on constrained delay compensation. But if it seems like it's, due to sample cut in, that may be to the particular library. All right, so how do I normalize an audio track that I didn't record loud enough? In 7.5, you used to just be able to click on normalized audio and it would do it. Excuse me 1 second, just emailing away. That I didn't record. In 7.5, you used to be able to just click on the normalize and it would just do it, but it doesn't work in 11. So let's say if I'm here, I just select the file and go to audio, to processes, to normalize. And then make sure that you have auto apply enabled. So, and you could also just kind of, just come right over here. And I think that's on by default, but make sure you have the auto apply on. And then, you could just simply kind of do the same exact functionality. Okay, so I see Jam Tracks is like, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I tried the glue tool and it totally worked, except I don't know you could do your trick about alt drag on top like that. Cool. So that's good. Okay, short and sharp. All my audio tracks go to groups, auxes. Question, would I save any CPU or latency by disabling the group channel pans? As any panning going on is in the audio tracks that feed the auxes. So it really, it's not going to save CPU. The panning isn't going to be like a heavy CPU process. So I think if there's any changes that, I don't think if there are any changes in CPU utilization, I think it's going to be, negligible at best. So I don't think that the panning is going to make a difference. Okay, we have a question. Hello, everyone. How often do these hangouts happen? I just upgraded to Cubase 11 Pro from my AI that I got with the purchased UR44C sound card. So we've been doing these since pandemic started, roughly every Tuesday and Friday afternoon, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. And you can subscribe to the channel and get more information. All right, I know we had questions that were sent in, so let's go ahead and get through some of those. Okay, so this is also kind of in the offset category. Let me I'll just scroll up, start from the top, sorry. Okay, so I have an interesting question. I often edit MIDI, especially drums. I'm aware of the possibilities in MIDI control and so on. Is it easy to edit velocity to just one sound, for instance, only the hi-hat? What I want to do is to change only one span of velocities. Let's say I want only velocities in hi-hat between 10 and 30 to increase by 30. Velocities over 30 must not be changed. All right, so we'll show you how you could do this. So let's say I have a quick drum part, and we just wanted to do it for hi-hats only. So let's say I will take this and I'll just quickly do in the drum editor, but you're not required to. So okay, so now I'm here. Let's say I have hi-hat, and I'll just, okay, so we have our hi-hat kind of laid out for us here, and we want it to just adjust the velocities of the hi-hats, let's say, that are between the velocity values of 10 and 30 and raise them by 30. So for this, we could go to our logical editor, and we're going to choose under function transform. We're going to say value 2, because value 2 is the velocity of a MIDI note message. And we're going to say inside range of 10 to 30. And what we want to do is to take value 2, and we want to add 30. So now we're going to take the velocities that are between 10 and 30 and add 30 velocity values to those. So now I'll come over here, hit apply, and we can see that those notes are the ones that meet that condition. So these were the only ones between 10 and 30, and now those values have been raised. So again, function transform, value 2 is inside range, and this is where we specify the value range that you want. And so we've identified that as kind of our target. And what do we want to do with that target? We want to go to our value 2 and add 30. So we want to increase the velocity by 30, and that's how you could do it. So it says, I watched one of your videos explaining offline processing to add effects to a particular section. I did everything as you explained, range tool selected, then F7, add effects. But for some reason, I don't get the sound when I play the whole thing. I can listen to the preview on the offline box, but I can't hear it in the whole project. What am I doing wrong? All right. So sometimes, one of the things that could cause this could be when we have, so let's say we have our vocal here, could be maybe the auto apply is off. So let's say I play this.
What dimension am I in?
So we could select, let's say I wanted to put the echo just on that particular part. So I will go to my direct offline processing history. And if you don't have the auto apply on, I could come over here and you could kind of audition your results. So let's say, if you wanted to preview, you could do that. But if auto apply isn't turned on, it's not going to actually render that file. So make sure that you have the auto apply checked. And then once you have that checked, it's now going to play back.
What dimension am I in?
So, and if I just wanted to come over here, so just make sure that you have the auto apply turned on, or you could just click on apply right there. And now as you play back. So if you kind of have played around with some of the previews, make sure that you hit apply. And I think that'll take care of it. All right, so I got this from Marcini. I had to uninstall Halion SE recently ever since I've been experiencing an error when selecting certain sounds, i.e. Strat guitar, chorus guitar, clavinet, and other sounds under the all selection. It says the error audio files missing all the other sounds and any other third-party banks I have all work okay. I've tried to reinstall, I've checked Library Manager, but to no avail. So I think I didn't find all of those exact names, so I'm not sure if those particular sounds, I found some that were close, and I did find a clavinet sound. But, I found not those particular sounds. So I'm not sure if those are factory sounds or not, but it could be maybe they're in Halion and not Halion Sonic SE. But I couldn't find those exact sounds. So, Mark, if you could let me know if those are the exact names, that would be helpful. All right. Can you please tell me if it's possible to use the Supervision plugin Nuendo also in Wavelab Pro 10? I cannot manage Wavelab Pro 10 to find that plugin, or if there's maybe a special Wavelab version of it. I'd be grateful learning what I must do in order to be able to use that plugin in Wavelab Pro 10. Thanks in advance for your answer. So within Wavelab, we're going to have a lot of that functionality already in. So the supervision plugin isn't utilized for that. So. All right, so we had a question. Is it possible in a Cubase 11 sampler to adjust the pitch, reversing, or other audio manipulation of individual slices instead of the entire audio file? So with the sampler track, it's dealing with one particular audio file. If you wanted to reverse a single slice or pitch a single slice, you could do that within Groove Agent SE, but currently not inside of the sampler track. We also had a question about, and this maybe been a continuation from last week, but if we wanted to kind of, change the contrast between like some of the notes between like, the black keys in the key editor, and how we could do that is we could come over here to preferences. And if we go to, color schemes, you'll see editor area background. And now if you wanted this to be lighter, you could just kind of come over here. So let's say, okay, I want my lines to be lighter. I could just come over there, hit apply, and then you could see kind of more contrast. So if you wanted to customize that, you could do that very easily. So let's say I'll go back to my defaults. We had a question. We'll try to get this squeezed in. Maybe I'll just do this on Friday. I apologize, Jan, about making the. I just want to make sure I have enough time to do it, to make the how to make an expression map. So I will do that one maybe first thing on Friday. Let's see if there's any other quick questions because we're running short on time. Thank you all for wonderful questions. Okay. So with the Steinberg audio interfaces, can you record in real time with a compressor and print it? Yes, you can. So if I wanted to come, we'll just show this quickly. So I'll just turn off in this interface. I need to disable the control room, but I want to come to the outputs. So if I wanted to add an audio track, we'll just choose from this input. And from within the hardware settings, you'll see like a little routing page. And what that's going to allow you to do is we just do a new project here quickly. And let me just check my connections. But yeah, within that, you can definitely have just you could print through the compressor. So I'll just deactivate that. But yeah, so you could definitely have that kind of set up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up because we're just about out of time. Jan, I'll get to you the expression maps question on Friday. Sorry about that. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions, and we will see everyone on Friday. And if you want to send me an email, we'll send you a link to the Zoom meet and greet afterwards. So we'll do that, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks. Hope everyone learned something. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.